Hey, fellow conspirators, it is I, LG Grande, the new number 6, also known, perhaps, as Boutros Ghali. Yeah, welcome back to Liberty Conspiracy Videos. Nice to have you along for the ride, fellow conspirators. Don't forget, you can find us over at YouTube at Liberty Conspiracy, and the same thing on BitChute. I know, it's amazing. And you can find me over at Guard Goldsmith on Twitter, and I'm also on Facebook. Don't forget, the Liberty Conspiracy is still on Facebook and hasn't been removed yet, which is kind of nice. Oh, thank you, great overlords of Facebook. Thank you, Zuckerbook. Also, if you are so inclined, Kevin Klein, please feel free to find me over at MRC TV with the great team over there. They are more paleo-conservative rather than complete voluntarists, but we do have a lot in common. Okay, it's time, perhaps, to let the other shoe drop. Remember in the last video, I talked about this New Jersey gym where a lot of people arrived to confront the police, and the police backed down from the Cowabunga 19 crackdowns and actually said, you know what, have a nice day. They weren't going to enforce the governor's crackdown stay-at-home order, and the place opened. Well, I had also mentioned just before that how lawsuits, in some cases, against state governors that were imposing these crackdowns were bearing some fruit. But it was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory, because in order to try to stop the state from locking you down, you had to appeal to another branch of the state, and you were still forced to pay for that branch of the state. So how can you call it justice when you're forced to pay for the system which is delivering you the verdict about so-called justice? I said, it's a strange sort of vibe that you get because you can't really escape. It's like appealing to a mafioso. Well, at the end of that video, I showed this small victory in New Jersey, and I said, this is great, but it's momentary. And guess what? Let's go to the videotape. Yes, indeed. The other shoe has dropped, and it is a heavy, heavy boot made of concrete and other types of things that will drag you down. The story, let's go up to the headline. Headline! From Real Clear Politics, police make arrests at New Jersey gym, which they allowed to reopen. Yes, indeed. After the police left, the guys at the gym, the Attilas gym, were fined, and they were arrested. So let's have a little video action here and see what we can see.
To tell us not to show up today. And Ian told us not to show up today because they lied to him. They said that they're arresting him right now. They're arresting him right now.
Good thing there's social distancing.
You guys are breaking the law. You guys are breaking the law. We're not backing up.
Wouldn't want to spread disease now, would we? In the meantime, all these guys are deriving their salary from that guy. Their clothing, the car, their haircuts, their firearms, their belts. Yeah, one of the folks over on the side said we live in a communist country. Pretty darn close. Collectivism, any form, whether it's National Socialism or party socialism, class socialism, it's all collectivism, and it is anti-individual, anti-choice, anti-economic, anti-ethics. It's very simple. It's anti-free will, it's anti-soul. That's all there is to it. Sure, you can form a collective, as long as it's voluntary, that's no problem. That's what we all do every day. We form little collectives, 2, 3s. Everything we do on our own is voluntary, right? That's what life is supposed to be. And we can form our own collectives. We can dissolve them. It's all based on free will and voluntary association. So, unfortunately, that's the story. And you can see here what I wrote last time. And I would like to give you a little additional info. Likewise, when one sees the armed agents of the state back down from an immediate confrontation, it is just one moment and an encounter with one tiny portion of the state, an organization that has not ceased making invalid claims over one's life, privacy, peaceful interactions, and property. Going as far back as Aristotle, many believe that constitutions can hold back the state and keep it within certain parameters, such that it only encroaches on your earnings in order to provide you with the police protection it offers you, whether you ask for it or not. Wink, wink. But of course, that itself is not an offer. It is an aggressive act because it is applied to you. And this is a message to anyone who believes in the myth of the social contract. No thanks. Contracts are voluntary, not forced. It is applied to you whether you ask for it or not, and you will be forced to continue to pay for it. As Lysander Spooner observed, the U.S. Constitution has not stopped government from growing and infringing on more liberty. But since a Constitution is an involuntarily applied statist assumption of power by the state itself, it is based on an invalid and immoral presupposition. And of course, therefore, it will naturally tend to take more of your liberties. On every front, even in trying to battle its police in court, one is forced to pay for it as the monopoly agency of so-called justice. But one cannot receive justice from a system that offers its brand of so-called justice through your servitude. Yep. Okay, now, I'm going to run through a couple other quick stories very, very briefly. First off, this one, Planned Parenthood improperly received $80 million in virus funds. Republicans demand they give it back. Is there a problem with some of the terminology here from the Blaze? Now, again, the Blaze, that's Glenn Beck's organization, and sometimes he does great work trying to defend freedom. I don't think he goes far enough in many cases. I think he's off base in many other cases, but I'm sure we could have some terrific conversations and get along well. I've met him in the past. He's a very nice guy and a very talented guy, too. I know some people get, riled about certain media figures, whatever. They get very upset by some of the things they say. I tend to try to take a little softer tone towards folks unless they're actually engaged in trying to get into political office or they're really, really extreme for a long period of time. I don't know. Sometimes I can go back and forth on folks, but usually I try to keep that line. In this case, the Blaze, the headline writer, messed up. I won't go into the details on this because it's very obvious. This is all part of that CARES Act bailout thing that they came up with. And you can see, oh no, this is the PPP. This is the PPP. This is the private business bailout thing that they handed out money for. But in this case, Planned Parenthood improperly received. Well, how is the redistribution of someone else's money proper in the first place? Whether it's Planned Parenthood or anybody else, would it be proper if it was some other organization like the Child's Tiddlywinks organization that received the money? No, because it's stolen from people through the coercion of the state, through the gun that the state always has ready to point at you, and the jail bars it has ready to put you behind, to leave a preposition dangling. So that's just a little bit of something. Of course, it's good to know what happened there, and we can talk about the anti-ethics of people who claim that abortion is not the taking of life, which it clearly is the taking of a human life. But we'll talk about that at a different time. Also, I want to give you this one. This is a big deal in my view. This story comes from the Activist Post. And at first blush, it might seem to some of the folks who look at this international spying stuff as being, well, they're already doing it. But I do want to give you this information because it's an added cut to the death of 1,000 cuts of privacy, which it's already dead, as many people point out. But just to see the assumption of power here is very important. The government has a new secret watch list and can track Americans without a warrant. Okay, now Max Slavo writes, the government now has a new secret watch list that allows his administration to track this administration to track Americans without a warrant. In case you haven't noticed, your rights are being suspended and removed in quick succession. So we go on, he bases this on a report from Newsweek. I didn't want to necessarily, Newsweek occasionally they have stuff that surprises me, and they'll have people in there and they're like, wow, they must be desperate to try to attract, as I hit my mic, they must be desperate to try to attract people who are maybe not so liberal now because they know they're dying. But this is what it says in Newsweek. The criteria to be placed on the new watch list demands that an individual be associated with transnational criminal organizations. That is not necessarily the case, including it just depends on what they label a criminal organization. And yeah, see, it's sort of like when they tried to label people who were Ron Paul supporters as potential terrorists. Yeah, that was nice. Thank you very much, National Security Agency and what was it, FBI? Transnational criminal organizations include not just drug cartels, crime syndicates, and gangs, but also political groups such as nationalist parties and information activists. See, so they're calling people who are information activists, the government labels them, if they want to, criminal organizations. Okay. And as you can see, as Activist Post writes, the new transnational organized crime watch list, TOC watch list, is modeled after the terrorist screening database, which was created in the wake of September 11, 2001. Yeah, those attacks. Yeah, you know where that's written in the Constitution? No, it's not. That's right. As a single repository of terrorist suspects. Over the years, that watch list has grown to include 1.2 million people, among whom are roughly 6,000 Americans that the FBI associates with domestic terrorism. In other words, domestic terrorists are Americans who question the government and disagree with the official narrative. Right? Right. The new TOC watch list authorizes agencies to collect information even when there is no evidence of a crime or intent to commit a crime. This authority circumvents criminal justice requirements of due process, equal protection under the law, and freedom of association under the Constitution. Very correct. Well done. I like it. Way to go, Mac. Appreciate that. All right, and another one from the Activist Post. This one I'm going to go just real quick on this one. They don't want to come back to work. Restaurant blames CARES Act for labor shortage. Oh yeah, baby, you got that right. Tyler Durden, of course, does great work. You can find his stuff at Zero Hedge all the time. One of the great tragedies in America today is that of the CARES Act, which includes a $1,200 stimulus check and an additional $600 weekly payment for the unemployed, and it has given millions of Americans their first real taste of socialism, which is the sweet taste of the forbidden fruit of free money. And of course, he's being sarcastic because it's not free. It's coming through indebtedness and taxation. The indebtedness will be paid off with future indebtedness and more taxation. It's enslavement and the destruction of your buying power. And of course, it is not productive. These people are getting money and they're not producing anything. That's not good. That's a very, very bad thing. Okay. Next, and of course it's not constitutional. We'll talk about that again in a minute. All right, next. Thousands could die from delays in cancer surgery due to COVID-19 restrictions. Oh, I said it. Oh my God. YouTube might do something to me. Okay. Now, the deal on this one is this is from England, but I've already highlighted the pertinent portions of it because this will show you how blind the British can be to their own system. Yeah, we know. Boiling frogs, we know what happens. People get normalcy bias. Many cancer patients end up experiencing delays of several months to their cancer treatment in the context of the pandemic, including in operations, or may end up, including in operations to remove tumors. Those patients whose cancer will have progressed during the delay and who might otherwise have been effectively cured by surgery could now be at risk of their cancer coming back and shortening their lives. No kidding. Scientists at the Institute of Cancer Research London analyzed existing Public Health England data on delays. I'm sure it's a lot worse than what the organization even releases, to cancer surgery on patients' 5-year survival rates to estimate the effect of 3-month or 6-month delays, respectively. Okay, let's just stop right there. They already have 3-month to 6-month delays. In fact, I know someone who passed away a few years ago, a writer, Graham Joyce, who was able to sneak in and get some cancer coverage from the NHS, while another writer who had a similar cancer was not. He got delayed, and that other writer died very quickly. Graham was able to survive for a while longer. So the NHS already delays some people who are cancer patients for 3 months. This is clear. So this is just more people who will be delayed. Their modeling, which factored in the risk of hospital-acquired CV-19 infection, showed dramatic differences in the impact of delay on cancer survival depending on patients' age, their cancer type, and whether it was earlier or later stage cancer. The team found that a delay of 3 months across all 94,912 patients who would have had surgery to remove their cancer over the course of a year would lead to an additional 4,755 deaths. Taking into account the length of time that patients are expected to live after their surgery, the delay would amount to 92,214 years of lost life. Incredible. All right, another quick one. The U.S. state has already established legal means for mandatory vaccinations, as I skip over the word already in a terrible way. This is a very key piece, and it's not getting a lot of attention. My friend Lisa, I'm so glad she got to see this. Lisa, if you're watching, miss you. And I'm really glad that you got to see this piece, obviously, as I reiterate. In Last American Vagabond, this is the original source. I'm going to go through a few things. Going to skip down. You'll see here, this is just brief here. Global health authorities debate how quickly they can roll out contact tracing surveillance programs. Last American Vagabond was recently sent the meme below, which has been circulating the internet in recent days. The image claims that someone's husband recently flew from Louisiana to Florida, where he was handed a mandatory quarantine form to fill out. According to the Post, the man was essentially forced to sign if he wanted to exit the plane. Now, obviously, we're not sure whether that is verified, right? Looked up information, couldn't necessarily find it, but it seems to be very plausible because of other information that they already got here at Natural Blaze. And for that, we'll go down to the bottom. This is some of the information from the meme. My husband flew from Louisiana to Florida, and so on and so forth. This is supposedly what he received here. If you want to blow this up on your screen, you can. It's clear. But this is the key thing right here. We decided to fact check this meme to see if there was truth to the claim, and unfortunately the document is in fact a Florida state document. Here's what we found. The document is called COVID-19 Department of Health Mandatory Self-Isolation Airport Travel and can be found on the official website of the Florida Airports Council. The form asks travelers to put their home address, a detailed description of the trip, and the names and birth dates to family members who traveled with the person filling out the form. And there's more. These are the key parts. At the bottom of the form, it states the following. I understand that any individual in my family who violates the self-isolation or self-quarantine by failing to remain within the confines of the address I provided for my stay in Florida for the mandatory length of time can be subject to prosecution under sections 252.50 or 381.00315 subsection 6. Florida statutes, which if convicted is punishable with up to 60 days imprisonment, a fine not more than $500 or both. And here's the rest. In addition, additionally it says, pursuant to Executive Order 20-80 and the Florida Department of Health declaration of a public health emergency, wink, wink, wonderfully constitutional, all of this is, ha ha, right. The state health officer and surgeon general can order an individual to be examined, tested, vaccinated, treated, isolated, or quarantined for Cowabunga 19. Any isolation or quarantine order issued pursuant to Section 318.00315 Florida statutes shall be enforceable by injunction filed in a Florida Circuit Court. Finally, passengers are reminded that failure to follow any isolation or quarantine order by the Florida Department of Health is a second-degree misdemeanor. It's already there. Patently, massively unconstitutional. All right, very quickly. Okay, yeah. A York County, South Carolina man who's been shut out of his job by the state legislature and Governor Henry McMaster has also been shut out of offering vegetables for sale on his own property. As reporter Alicia Turner reports for Count on 2 television, a South Carolina man says his business was shut down for trying to put food on people's table and his own. His name is John Long, and he could be our neighbor. He could be you or me, I write. Mr. Long is a carpenter who has been prevented from offering his primary skills to willing customers thanks to the March edict by the government declaring that what were essential and non-essential jobs, which effectively shut down his livelihood. In order to survive, keep his home, and offer something others might want, Mr. Long has been going out at 2 a.m. to buy produce, drive home, and sell it to people passing his lawn. But now York County, South Carolina, says it's illegal because it's in a residential area. So I said, yep, little Leviathan rears its ugly head with zoning. Of course, zoning didn't exist in the U.S. 200 years ago. It is an outgrowth of political interests working with special interests to restrict competition and offer favored land prices to other special interests. Inspired by the 18th and 19th century British practice of enclosure that occurred as the feudal system decayed and royal peers worked to create corporate holdings over land, it creates a set of rules that often damage the freedom of small landowners. And Mr. Long is one of them. If I was uptown in the Food Lion parking lot, I could sell, but I can't do it on my own land. That's right. Now, we could go into speculation as to whether or not this man was working online out of his own home, if they would apply the same dumb standard. But I just wanted to bring this up to you. If you go over to the Mises website, this is the Mises Wiki. The enclosure movement under England's feudal system, most of the rural area consisted of open fields. That's during the feudal period, remember. Open fields and forests with large sections set aside for workers to raise their own grain and graze livestock. Okay, now, let me just shift this over a little bit so you can see it better. There we go. Okay, now, I think this is important to bring up because this is intertwined with British common law. And these were standards that, much like in ancient Ireland, they developed on their own through their own interaction. Now, Ireland didn't have the same royal system for quite a while, under which the British common law grew. So the British common law was always sort of encased in this weird kingship thing for a number of years. There were some early periods, very early periods in England where they had a sort of similar system to Ireland, but they got taken over by the kings rather quickly. The common law still sort of operated within that for quite a while during the feudal system. And you can see here, they were set aside for workers to raise their own grain and graze livestock. With the rise of the cottage industry, private employment and both agricultural and industrial production for the market instead of the manor, more and more of the, again, let me move this over for you, sorry about that. More and more of the open fields, commons, were enclosed with fences for the exclusive use of their owners. Of course, these owners were not the British commoners, they were the peers, they were the feudal lords. So you saw eventually what happened was, and this is why many people who are libertarian Georgists have a big problem with this, with what they see as property ownership, because they have this long history of property being used by the feudal system and then granted to the peers, and then the peers subletted or rented out or sold off parcels to friends, and they used the parliament to give themselves advantages and so on. Usually the landed aristocracy, while many of the smaller holdings were consolidated into large ones. The movement required many acts of parliament, yep, these were special acts, they were called special acts, and extended over the 18th and most of the 19th centuries. Okay, so I just wanted to bring that up. Now, this one, the one I started to jump to, is another one that I had produced for MRC TV, but I want to do a little something different here, and I want to go to my original one. You can see the headline, but I want to go to my original. Because the original that I wrote had a little bit more information in it that was edited, and so I want to give this to you. You know, this is just the way it works sometimes for pieces when they're released online, and you know, you have to work with an editor and so on. They have to try to make them shorter, and I thought there was something important that I wanted to give to you. So as I said here, more Californians are standing up to, and by the way, this is one of the major reasons why I wanted to do this video today. This one in particular gives you a piece of history that I think is valuable, American history, and it has to do with nullification. More Californians are standing up to collectivist Democrat Governor Gavin Newsom's authoritarian Cowabunga 19 lockdowns. From San Diego to Sacramento, pro-freedom folks are protesting on the beach and at the state capitol walls. And now one city is defying the chief of the police state by proclaiming it is a sanctuary from his orders. And that people there, I'm adding there, can open for business because of the rhythm of the way I was speaking. As Chris Enlow reports for The Blaze, the city of Atwater passed a resolution Friday that allows all city businesses, churches, and not-for-profit organizations to reopen despite the continuance of a mandatory state lockdown order. Now, this is a quote here, and then when it's translated to the MRC TV website, I put it in a particular code, and that puts it within its quotes. But for the sake of time for my own work, I know exactly where it's supposed to be, and I didn't put the quotes around it. But this is Chris Enlow's work here. And then we go on. Indeed, KFSN TV's Vanessa Vasconcelos writes, and again, another quote from Ms. Vasconcelos, the Atwater City Council voted on the resolution on Friday afternoon, saying it, quote, affirms the city's commitment to fundamental constitutional rights. Good job. As she notes, and again, this is all within the context of the Constitution. I am a voluntarist, but if we got the government, U.S. government and state governments at least to conform a little more closely to the Constitution, we'd have a much better situation everywhere. And she notes that Mayor Paul Crichton had this to say, and by the way, I miss Michael Crichton. Boy, he was cool, and he was really speaking up against the government just before he passed away, especially about climate change. Well done. So-called anthropogenic so-called climate change. This is America. This is the mayor. You have the choice. It's time for the government to stop dictating another month, another 3 months, 6 months. When is it going to end? When everyone is bankrupt? Then I wrote, of course, the amount of time in which the California government has engaged in wholesale suppression of the First, Fourth, Fifth, Sixth, Eighth, and 14th Amendments, as well as the contract clause of the U.S. Constitution, is not the central concern. The central concern is the initiation of the attack, the breach of the principle. And the resolution from the government of Atwater allows all Americans to look into this and remember the principles as they fight back against Newsom. Now, a little bit later, I've done videos on this where I spell it out in detail, how the Bill of Rights is broken and all the different amendments and the contract clause, and how the contract clause is broken by these types of interventions in the private marketplace when the government's clamped down and shut down people's businesses. I'll do a separate video on that one. I want to get to the nullification part of this, and this is the historical stuff that you can take with you. Okay? Like I can hear you answer. Okay. Thanks. Okay, so we have here, and the resolution from the government of Atwater allows all Americans to look into this and remember the principles as they fight back against Newsom. It also gives Americans a chance to see something else that is extremely important in U.S. history, the principle of nullification. From the founding of the United States Republic under the Constitution, the key underlying principle behind every politician's oath of office has been to protect and defend that supposed set of rules. As such, every politician has a sworn duty to not follow federal, state, and local edicts local edicts, statutes, and judicial commands that run counter to the Constitution. This is spelled out well by the excellent 10th Amendment Center, which is kept busy every day pointing out areas where the federal, state, or local governments are not operating constitutionally, and which educates people about the principle of nullification. It is also spelled out by many of the founders, perhaps the most prominent of whom can be seen in the figure of Thomas Jefferson. During the infamous Alien and Sedition Act crisis of 1798, the John Adams administration and its acolytes in Congress passed statutes banning published criticism of the president and inventing out of thin air a federal claim over immigration that, Jefferson correctly noted, were patently unconstitutional. The First Amendment bans Congress from abridging the freedom of speech, and while naturalization is a federal power in the Constitution, power over the presence of immigrants in the states was not and still is not. The only reason they're operating in this fashion is because of an 1875 decision. I've spelled it out before. I have it in my book, Live Free or Die. If you want to look it up, I'll do an entire video on that. It was one of my plans for one of the early videos that I do in the first month or so of Liberty Conspiracy videos. It's going to be one of those timeless things that you can just look at as a piece of scholarship and refer to it at any time. Okay. As Jefferson wrote in his famous Kentucky Resolution, the entire paragraph is extremely important, by the way, and I wanted to point that out to folks. Here you can find Kentucky Resolution, Founders Online, National Archives. You can find it all over the place. And November 10th, 1798. Wow, amazing. Okay, back to it. Resolved that the several states composing the United States of America are not united on the principle of unlimited submission to their general government, but that they compact under the style and title of a Constitution for the United States and of amendments thereto. Now, he, of course, has some assumptions in there that the states are doing this, and there's an assumption that the states are composed of willing people, which is the criticism that Lysander Spooner puts so cogently in his great 19th century treatise, No Treason, the Constitution of No Authority. However, we'll continue on that constitutional argument level for those people who swear oaths to the Constitution. Okay, or who vote for offices that are created by the Constitution. Because if you're doing that, then you should know what the supposed rules are. And if you don't, then don't participate in it, please. I would rather nobody participate in it because it is all fantasy. But there you go. They're operating under this fantasy, and this is the way things are. So at least if those people are swearing oaths to it, they can abide by it. Jefferson made the mistake with the Louisiana Purchase, and at least in this case, he was consistent here. So he says they constituted a general government for special purposes, delegated to that government certain definite powers, reserving each state to itself the residuary mass of right to their own self-government, and that whensoever, and by the way, self-government, there is only one form of self-government, the individual. State is not self-government. And that whensoever the general government assumes undelegated powers, it acts as unauthoritative, void, and of no force. Now, I would say that it is void and of no force. Any state, under any circumstances, is void and of no force because it is force itself, and it is illegitimate. It is not agreed to. So that makes it illegitimate force. That to this compact, each state acceded as a state and is an integral party, its co-states forming as to itself the other party, that the government created by this compact was not made the exclusive or final judge of the extent of the powers delegated to itself, since that would have made its discretion, and not the Constitution, the measure of its powers, but that as in all other cases of compact among parties having no common judge, each party has an equal right to judge for itself as well of infractions as of the mode and measure of redress. And Jefferson went further, explicitly saying that the larger government's claim to unconstitutional power was void. In this case, he talks about the claim of the federal government over immigration. Resolved that alien friends are under the jurisdiction and protection of the laws of the state wherein they are. that no power over them has been delegated to the United States nor prohibited to the individual states distinct from their power over citizens. And it being true as a general principle, and one of the amendments to the Constitution having also declared that, quote, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution nor prohibited by it to the states are reserved to the states respectively or to the people, the act of the Congress of the United States passed on the 22nd day of June 1798 entitled An Act Concerning Aliens, which assumes power over alien friends not delegated by the Constitution, is not law, but is altogether void and of no force. Well done. What the mayor and government of Atwater have done is a direct descendant of Jefferson's profoundly important and powerful rebuff of federal overreach, and it is utterly essential that contemporary Americans understand this. And while Americans remember this principle, applicable on every level, they might want to apply it to state licensing as well. For as the mayor notes, we're not looking to jeopardize anyone's business. That's a license you hold with the state. So we don't want to cause any harm there. Use your best judgment. People also can judge whether the licensing power the governor of California executes is constitutional or it's a shakedown. As I have noted for MRC TV, licensing is used by governments to attack businesses and block new competitors from entering the market, and it is highly questionable on numerous constitutional grounds. Vigilance, keen eyes, knowledge of the U.S. Constitution and state constitutions, a mind towards principle and freedom, networks of allies, and I would add gray and black markets. These qualities are essential and at a premium today in COVID Crackdown USA. COVID USA, yeah. Inside USA, inside USA. So that's all I wanted to give to you this time. And what I'm thinking of doing is going back each week and pulling out those long-term lessons to put together separate videos that have a string of them in a video, or separate videos that concentrate on just those particular issues. So we might see this particular last point brought up and put into its own separate video so that people can see what the nullification idea is. And again, if you want great information on the nullification reality in the Constitution, then go to the 10th Amendment Center. Mike over there, Mike and Mike, both do amazing work, and I highly recommend them. All right, that's it for now. I want to make this quick. It's already bigger than I expected. Thank you so much, everybody. Be seeing you.